Welcome everyone to the Things Around 8. In this video we will talk about another recent statement made by French President Emanuel Macron, insisting on the possible sending of European troops to Ukraine, also saying that the fate of the entire European continent will be decided there. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any news. This Thursday, May 2nd, a magazine published an interview with French President Emanuel Macron, in which he said, among other things, that Europe is not immortal and that it could die as a result of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Asked whether he remained willing to send soldiers to Ukraine, Macron said that faced with an enemy that does not rule out any option, France and Europe cannot rule out anything either, and he added that if Russia advances further and breaks the Ukrainian lines, and if in the face of this Kiev asks for Western support in the form of soldiers, Europe must see this request as legitimate and must, therefore, analyze it from an existential perspective. Not just from Ukraine, but from the entire European continent. Therefore, once again, Macron was not direct and explicit about sending soldiers to Ukraine, but he made it clear that he continues to see this as a perfectly viable option in an extreme case, which would be, in this specific case, the breach of Ukrainian lines. In the face of some major Russian offensive. In the interview, Macron described Russia as a power dedicated to destabilizing Europe, stating, once again, that his objective, as President of France, is to ensure that Russia does not win the war in Ukraine. Since, according to Macron, if Putin wins in Ukraine, he will not stop there and will continue to advance through other countries, plunging Europe into a new era of instability, chaos and war as it was in the 30s and 40s. Among all European leaders, the French president is always the most incisive in this position, having declared on several occasions his certainty that if he is not stopped where he is fighting now, the Europeans will inevitably have to go to war in the future, since, in their perception, a Russian victory in Ukraine would give Putin the impetus he needs to continue advancing across Europe, first by countries that are not members of the alliance, but inevitably reaching member countries, such as Finland and the Baltic countries. Macron's view is shared by many U.S. congressmen and senators, who say that if Russia is not defeated where it is fighting now, which is in Ukraine, in the future, U.S. soldiers will have to be sent to stop Russia from any NATO member country. For these politicians, and for Macron in particular, it is much more practical and cheaper to confront Putin through the Ukrainians, than to go to war in a few years against a Russia strengthened with the resources gained in Ukraine. Macron's speech was followed by statements from David Cameron, British Secretary of Defense, who, on a visit to Kiev, promised annual military aid of £3 billion for Ukraine, with no end date. With Cameron further saying that just as Russia attacks targets inside Ukraine, Ukraine has the right to use its weapons to attack military targets inside Russia. With the Secretary explicitly saying that Ukraine has the UK's permission to use British weapons in attacks against targets inside Russia. As expected, these two statements were very poorly received by Russia, with Dmitry Peskov, Vladimir Putin's spokesman, harshly criticizing Macron and Cameron's statements. And also this week, on Monday, April 29th, Kiev received a visit from another important ally, with Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of NATO, visiting the Ukrainian capital, taking the opportunity to pull the wool over the ears of the European members of NATO alliance, accusing them of having failed to promise to send 1 million artillery shells to Ukraine. Stoltenberg also criticized the 6-month delay in releasing the $60.8 billion US aid package for Ukraine, a delay that, according to Stoltenberg and several analysts, allowed Russia to advance in several frontline sectors, with the lack of ammunition also allowing the Russians to concentrate a large number of troops and vehicles for what is expected to be a major Russian offensive, most likely against the city of Kharkiv. The truth is that the current situation in Ukraine is definitely not easy at all, with Putin knowing that Ukrainian soldiers will soon have their stores replenished with weapons and ammunition, pressing the lines with everything they have available to take advantage of Ukraine's current moment of fragility. If Putin achieves what he wants and actually manages to break through Ukrainian lines, the French president promised that if Ukraine asks for help, his country and Europe as a whole will not rule out the possibility of sending soldiers to war, all with the aim, according to Macron, of fighting Putin there, where he is now, and not in some member country of the alliance in the future. Thank you very much for watching the video, And now I invite you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so we'll see you more often, and so you'll be up to date with everything that's happening. And I want to know which is your opinion on Macron's words?